Hey guys, this is Lacey Andrews Harris, and today I'm going to be demonstrating how to make a wall sign out of wood and paint. For this project, you're going to need vinyl and transfer tape for the stencil, something that cuts vinyl. I used my Cameo 3, weeding tools for the stencil, wood board, which can be any type of size of wood and any type of wood. I'm using a 1/4 inch thick piece of plywood that measures about 7 inches by 30 inches. You're going to want a wood stain. I chose Sun Bleached by Varathane. It's a wood stain. You don't have to have a wood stain, but if you're not going to use a wood stain, you're going to need to use extra poly just to protect your wood. Fast drying polyurethane. This is what I use by Minwax. It dries really fast and it dries in a satin. Any polyurethane will work. Paper towels and a bucket of water for rags. You're going to need something to cover your work surface. And last but not least, paint. Any paint would work, but each type has a different effect. Acrylic tends to work the best, but here I'm going to use chalk paint. This is Lagoon by Waverly Inspirations. I like the chalk paint because it runs less and it dries as a matte, and I think it's easier to work with. Okay, let's get started. So you're going to want to make sure that your work surface is fully covered. So you'll start by dipping it liberally into the stain and covering your work surface pretty liberally with this stain. Make sure it gets nice and evenly coated. Then you'll take a dry paper towel and wipe it off. Now you don't need to worry so much about the back of your board because you're not going to be able to see it anyways. And then we will give that a couple minutes to dry. Using my weeding tools now, I'm going to paint on the inside of the word, so I want to only weed the inside of the word so that I have a nice stencil. Oracle 651 is my favorite vinyl to use for stenciling because it weeds really, really easy and it comes off super easy when you need it to. Otherwise it sticks pretty well. So now I'm going to put a clear layer of polyurethane on my board using the same method as I did with the stain. So I gave the board about an hour to dry after staining so that stain can really settle in. Now there are lots of different types of urethanes that you can use. For this type of work, I prefer the wipe-on polyurethane. It goes on a lot clearer and it's easier to work with than the spray. I feel like with the spray, it gets very uneven. So we're going to take that and we're going to give it about 10 minutes to let this dry. Once that's done drying, then we'll tape the quotes on using transfer tape. And so here I have a piece of Cricut transfer tape. You can also use Silhouette's brand transfer tape, both of which can get pretty expensive though. So if you're in a pinch or you don't have those things, regular Scotch tape works on smaller stencils, but you can also use Glad's Press and Seal. That works pretty well. It's just a little bit more finicky, but especially if you're just using it as a stencil. So right now I have Cricut transfer tape and I'm going to take my pieces and lay them as close together as possible. And once I have all my pieces smoothed down onto the transfer tape, I'm going to flip it over and then I'm going to cut out my pieces of vinyl. So now I'm going to take my board, line up my quote. So now you'll want to go through and after squeegeeing to make sure that the pieces will stick to the transfer tape, we will slowly peel the backing off the original vinyl. So then there's like that. And now I won't stick that on there. I'll wait until I have made sure that I've got it all lined up exactly the way I want it. And one of the big issues is after you convince all the little pieces to stay on the transfer tape, getting them off the transfer tape then becomes another problem. And if you really care too much about it, you can take a ruler or a tape measure and draw lines as to be guides at the beginning. I don't really care as much. I kind of like the hand-painted rustic look. And then after you pull off your stencil, it's a really good idea to go back over it again with a squeegee just to make sure it's still on there so that when you paint, it won't bleed as bad. All right. So I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm going to dip it in the polyurethane first. Actually, let me rub it down with the squeegee one more time. Like those bubbles. Make sure that everything is stuck on there really, really good. It's not coming up anywhere, and even if it is, adding the polyurethane before the paint really helps to fill in those little microscopic gaps. Okay, so now that the polyurethane is dried, we're going to get out our paint of choice. Here I chose Waverly's chalk paint in the color Lagoon. It's a really pretty teal turquoise-ish color, which matches my color scheme in my house. The reason I chose the sun-bleached stain was to kind of be more like driftwood, be a more natural sandy color. So you're going to take your paint and make sure it's really shaken up well. Take your paintbrush and add a thin layer of paint. And now once you've gone over the entire thing, go over it again. So by giving that a few minutes to dry off, but not too long that it completely solidifies, because after it dries all the way, it's more likely to crack and rip the paint, and then you'd have to start over again. So once that's done, then we're going to carefully pick off our stencil. When you're done taking off the stencil, what you're going to want to do is paint the entire thing with polyurethane again, just to protect the paint that you've put on and the stain. And just like that, we have our wall sign. Thanks for watching.